Hello and welcome. I'm waiting for everything to start up on this end. Okay, here we are. Welcome to our Friday Live, and I so love doing these for you all. And I really am here to tailor this to you, so whether you're watching now at a later date, please say hello and let me know your aha moments and leave your questions. Am I answering your questions that you have about Neo-tantra with this series, or are there other questions that you want answered or other teachings that you would like? So let's dive in. Let me just take a sip of water. So last week I talked about 12 keys to Neo-tantra. And today I'm going to teach you a couple of simple practices and also address some other big themes in Neo-tantra, like what the fuck does semen retention, polyamory, and group sex have to do with Neo-tantra, or with tantra, as most people call it. And again, if you don't know, Neo-tantra is the Western sacred sexuality practices that usually go by the name tantra, because I am a practitioner of classical tantra, which is a totally different thing from the Western sexuality practices that we have. And in fact, I was just studying the Sri Vidya recently in my classical tantra studies course, and they were talking about the actual ritual practices that the Sri Vidya did. And there was so much that had to do with the divinization of the body, with the installation of the goddess into our body, with really transforming our own body into a body made of light, into the divine. And they did do that by using yantras, mantras, chakras, sometimes chanting, 16-syllable mantras for 2 hours, building a giant mandala, a geometric shape that was considered to be the goddess, and lots of practices. And some of these bleed over into Neo-tantra, but I find it to be a profound system that flies in the face of Western religious thought, which is so much about the body as impure and sinful and a distraction and something to be transcended. Tantra was very, very much about awakening, using the body, and that the body was the key to connecting with the divine. And yeah, often, and in the Sri Vidya, it was the goddess was the primary, the ultimate, and everything was the goddess, and everything came back to the goddess, and there was this feminine essence that was the ultimate reality. Very different from the masculine orientation of Western religion. And for me, as a woman who suffered a lot under, with patriarchal structures of West Texas and things like this, and also as an embodied being who was very shamed around my body and my female body, classical tantra has been such a revelation. Okay, so, oh yes, and before we go any further, I also want to mention, if you didn't know, my Retention Mastery Program with Stephen Saver Rowland is starting October 4th, and we're offering a $100 referral bonus. So if there's any man you know who would like to take the course and you refer him to me, just connect me with him in the DMs of Facebook, and when he signs up, I'll send you $100. So tell your friends, and anyone who signs up between now and September 25th, you'll get an extra bonus session as part of the program, an extra high-touch, smaller group bonus session. So if you sign up before September 25th, I know I sent out an email and I said August, but I'm sure you guys can figure it out. All right, so yeah, there's 11 men that said yes, and make sure if you're on the fence that you reach out to me or to Stephen and sign up so you can get that bonus. All right, so how to practice Neo-tantra step-by-step video 2. I'm going to tell you something I don't usually talk about that much, but I was having sex with my partner earlier today, and I was thinking, how am I employing, Neo-tantra in this encounter? And we talked about it afterwards together too. And I think, at this point in my life, So there were many years when I did hours of practice every day. So I lived in a tantric community, and I would wake up and I would do 3 to 4 hours of on the mat practice, of breathing, of asana, of meditations, of mantras, pranayamas, bandhas, all of these things. And it really allowed me, and this was traditionally the kind of practice that yogis or tantric practitioners would do from a very young age, even from 6 years old, to prepare themselves, to prepare their energy body, their nadis, the energy channels, to really skillfully work with sexual energy and other energies in their adult practice. So for me, there was this very methodical, systematic, habitual, consistent practice for years. And at this point in my life, almost 10 years later, it's just ingrained. It just flows naturally. And I don't necessarily do a step-by-step thing. Sometimes I do because it's fun, but it's not necessary anymore. And so I think people come to Neo-tantra, often men come because they're like, I want it to be hotter. I want it to be better. I want it to be more. And thinking that there's a special flick of your wrist or a special position or a special thing that you do. And that's just not really the case. It is very much an internal game. It's so much having to do with the right mindset, which is not being ashamed of your desire or your body, and communication. So being able to openly talk about sex with your partner. But I find that this is sorely lacking in most people. Very often I encounter that women who are very unable to talk about sex, shamed out of it from purity culture. And when their male partners do, the women feel pressure, or vice versa. And so, with all this religious indoctrination, we've really done ourselves a disservice because we're largely unable to even communicate about sex. And that is the fundamental thing that you need to have a good neo-tantric practice. It's good communication. You need to be able to sit with your partner, cross-legged on the bed, or sitting in 2 chairs. If you can't sit cross-legged, it's fine. And to say, my intention for our lovemaking today is pleasure, is healing, is to fall even deeper into love with each other. And to be able to cultivate that communication over the course of your entire relationship. And that requires really being present in your relationship, noticing your own blocks around it, both of you being on a growth path. And many people did not select their partners with those things in mind, because there's a lot of pressure just to get married for the sake of getting married, or to get married so then you have easy access to sex, or to get married because that's just what everyone does, or to get married out of fear, or because you accidentally got someone pregnant. And very often we haven't selected for these qualities in a partner, and then it's hard. And there is some grieving that can happen there. So mindset and communication, but sometimes couples do come to me in their 60s and they're ready to learn, and they're peeling back the layers and all of the water under the bridge and the things. And the woman very often is like, oh, I never knew I could voice my needs. I never knew I could say no. I never knew I could ask for it to be a different way. And the man is like, I never knew I could slow down or stop. Sex was always just very linear. I never knew that it could be different. I never knew that she wouldn't get mad at me, right? So it's a beautiful, beautiful process to undertake with your partner if you are both willing and ready and you really want to change. So, and I've seen it happen for many different couples. Even just earlier today, I was crying hearing the message from one of my clients of how completely he was able to transform his shame and start actually talking to his wife about his fears and insecurities, and how she completely heard and understood him. And then they feel so much closer and have much better sex now. And it's just, I'm so honored to get to do this. And that was my experience too, my own personal experiences. I remember when I was in my early 30s and I was married, and my husband, bought a wedge pillow. One of those pillows that is wide and then it comes down to a wedge. It's supposed to raise my hips or something like that and just help sex feel more pleasurable. And I just felt so much shame. And I couldn't find the words even to ask for what I wanted or to say pussy or to say clitoris. It was just like covered and drenched in shame and just made me want to withdraw and hide and run away. And it was just overwhelming. And it took a community, like living in a community, which is why I do group programs, that freed me from that and allowed me to speak freely and to say, oh, well, let's just study this like scientists. Let's get curious about this. So, we have the retention mastery that's coming up soon, which is part of what's going to happen there. Having this community discourse around a very esoteric topic of male full body orgasm, orgasm without ejaculation, and all of those beautiful things, which, by the way, one of the surprising things about retention mastery is that it's really helpful for birth control. Now, nothing is ever 100%, and I'm not going to say that you should pretend that it's a end-all be-all. And we could go into the whole like sperm in the pre-cum and all of these things, and there have been studies of that. But in my experience and many people's experience in my community, in the community I lived in, it was very effective. And it's like you as a man taking the birth control into your own hands and really paying attention to your body and really making a huge effort to partner with your woman in helping her with that, instead of assuming that sex equals ejaculation. Okay. So once you have unshamed yourself as a sexual being and unshamed your sexuality, and you have established good communication with your partner around sex, then you're ready to, and by the way, if you are having a hard time doing those things, I specialize in those two things, so come find me for some one-on-one work or join one of my group programs. But once you've done those things, you're ready to have a great neo-tantric practice. And if you come to the bedroom and you're like, okay, I'm ready, but now what do I do with my hands and my body? Like, what the fuck exactly do I do? I will show you a couple of practices. So the first is you sit across from your partner, and a lot of Neo-tantra is really just working with energy and breath and connection. It's not necessarily about what you're doing when you're making love outside of that. Like, you could be having just like missionary position sex, but it's Neo-tantric because you're both circulating your energy together, or you're eye gazing in a particular way, or you're breathing together in a particular way. Neo-tantra is just about bringing the awareness to what you're doing and choosing intentionally to work with your body and your energy so that you go and dissolve deeper into the experience together. It's about sex as meditation. It's about like not just having sex being lost in the same worry thoughts or being lost in the same boredom. It's about speaking up, noticing what's going on, and choosing to use your breath and your body and your energy circulation to have a deeper experience, to make it sacred, to make it an experience that brings you closer to the divine and closer to each other, rather than just like a mechanical thing of trying to get off, which is fun to do sometimes too. I mean, as long as you it can be hot, just talk about it first. Okay, so one of the ways that you can facilitate this happening when you're actually in the moment and you're having sex and there's so much going on is you practice it beforehand. And it's not just practice, it's actually part of going deep. So before you have sex, you sit together and you share your intention. You're like, okay, I want to fall deeper in love with each other in this lovemaking session. And then you play some really gorgeous heart-drenched, heart chakra music that vibrates at the energy of the heart chakra, right? And this is something that I've been teaching the men in my men's sex mastermind, is like, what does actually healthy love, healthy heart chakra look like? What is that vibration? And when you listen to music that vibrates on the energy of like lust and like the carnal desire, it has like this heavy, sticky feeling. When you listen to music that vibrates on the level of heart chakra, it has this playful lightness, a beautiful feeling that flows easily. So you put on some music like that and you do a heart breath and I teach this in my couples workshop, my couples bliss night. I have it online. Actually, you can purchase it and do it online. It's a live workshop I taught online, and I do it in the Bay Area once every 6 months or so too. But you just inhale into your heart with your hands on your heart. And then exhale your hands to your partner's heart. And then inhale yours back to your heart. And as you're inhaling your hands back up to your heart and scooping up, you're receiving love from your partner. So as you're inhaling, you can imagine your partner's exhaling their hands to your heart, right? So you're asynchronous breathing. Like when I'm inhaling, he's exhaling, and vice versa. So I inhale his love into my heart, and I'm scooping my hands up to my heart, and then I exhale it to his heart, and I'm like sending, bowing, like offering it to him, and then inhale, scoop his love up, exhale, and you just go on like that while eye gazing for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and even just that. Thank you for your comments. I see someone's made comments, but they're not showing up. There's like a glitch, so I'll have to answer them later. And you just, when you do that for 5 minutes, everyone cries. It's gorgeous. You feel so connected. You just want to dissolve into hugging each other afterwards. It's a gorgeous practice, and it involves breath, moving energy, and then eye gazing. And I always say eye gaze, left eye to left eye. But you can do whatever you want. Just choose it ahead of time. But left eye to left eye, because we try to look at both at once, your eyes get jittery, and then it like makes the practice not very deep. So eye gaze while you're doing the heart breath, and it might bring up embarrassment, shame, laughter. It might be really intense or overwhelming. Just blink normally. Don't be going like this the whole time. And stay in your center. So I teach my clients like a central channel breathing, like really feeling a stance of power, a seat of power, like anchored in yourself. A lot of times when people do eye gazing, they're like leaning forward, like, oh, can I get you? Or like, ooh. So you want to stay in your center, be relaxed, have a soft gaze, just be beholding your partner while you're like doing the heart breath. So you can see that alone, that practice involves like staying in your center, breath, eye gazing, and energy. And these are some of the hallmarks of Neo-tantra. I mean, that's a very basic practice, but already it's bringing in a lot of things that are that most people don't use when they're making love. Okay, I'm going to use my phone to check the comments here just to see if I can
that are
see them.
use my phone to
hi
check
Joe.
the comments here just to see.
All right, that was too confusing because then I had hearing myself on the phone too. So I'll answer your comments after. So I think I'm going to leave it at that one practice for now. And what I want to say is do it outside of sex, before you have sex, and then when you're making love, remember that. And how are you gazing at your partner? Are you still gazing at them with the soft eye and like letting yourself dissolve into their gaze, and maybe pausing your lovemaking sometimes and just holding them in stillness in your gaze and like surrendering into the vastness of the mystery behind their eyes? That is Neo-tantra. As you're thrusting, are you inhaling and exhaling the heart breath? You know, you're not using your hands, obviously, but you could still be like both of you exchanging that energy back and forth with your heart and just like, dissolving deeper and deeper into love. You could be, with every thrust, sending heart energy up through her, visualizing it, like exhaling heart energy up through her body and then inhaling it back down through yours in a loop. There's lots of loop practices like that in Neo-tantra, and you can learn some others of them I just reposted an old video called Cool Things to Do in Yab Yum. It's in the featured section of this group. And I give you a few practices of how to breathe and loop energy in Yab Yum position. So, okay, I take it back. I said Neo-tantra is not about positions, but I guess Yab Yum is one position that it is about, and that is helpful for it because you're both sitting up, but like I'm sitting on top if I have a male partner, and if you're a homosexual couple, you can do this however you want. But usually the woman is sitting on top of the man, and even the penis can be inserted, and then you can be doing the breathing in this position and the rocking and the moving. And it's really nice to touch foreheads there or to do eye gazing. All kinds of different breathing you can do. And again, I explain all of that in the Yabyum video. So I hope you're getting a sense of, what these are and what the practices look like. And it really just comes down to pick the ones that work for you. And this is what I do with my clients. I give them a whole library of practices and I'm like, okay, we practice some of them in session. They practice them on their own in lovemaking in between sessions. I know it's the best homework ever. And then we decide like, okay, this is your library of practices to choose from. And you incorporate it into your lovemaking until eventually it becomes internalized and you just do it automatically. But I think you're getting a sense of what those are. And if you want like a rigorous, structured, okay, here are these practices, we're going to do them over a period of time. I'm going to be offering, I don't know when yet, but hopefully later this fall, Fundamentals of Neo-tantra course. And then maybe after that, for the people who have taken that one, I'll do like the intermediate and then the advanced versions, because it does get very advanced. There is a book called Sex, Sorcery, and Spirit by Jason Miller. And it's the best explanation I've had of really, really advanced sacred sexuality techniques. He really mixes a lot of things from Buddhism and Hatha yoga and sex magic and tantra and puts it together. But it's and you will see how highly technical it gets. And those are using, very technical breath holds like vase breathing and tumo, and also bandhas or locks like Jalandhara bandha, Uddiyana bandha, Mula bandha. So you can, and they have incorporated all of those highly technical things into lovemaking. And if you want to learn that, only a special kind of person really has the discipline to say, oh, I want to learn these technical things and then do them together with our partner in sex. Because as you can see, like that is a completely different kind of sex. It's not like just being in the flow, sort of the hotness of pornographic sex. It's not that whatsoever. It's real technically tantric sex. And so those things I only teach people who really, really, really want it, because it's different. It's a whole different world. It's not like, oh, this is the ultimate hotness ever. It requires you to do a lot of practice, consistent practice over time of something that's very different, that might not feel sexy, is what I'm trying to say. And a lot of people come to Neo-tantra only wanting things that are sexy. But if you want the actual secret practices, they don't feel sexy at first. And they require discipline in order for you to master them. But what they do is they will show you how to use sex as a path to the divine, to truly, truly use it in the most skillful way as a prayer, as a way of surrendering your ego's self and connecting with the transcendent and immanent goddess. But you have to really want that. Okay, so now let's talk about some other misconceptions of Neo-tantra. A lot of people come to Neo-tantra and have the impression that it's about group sex or polyamory, and or that it's all about semen retention. So here's the thing. When Neo-tantra first exploded on the scene in America, or maybe when it was, really getting up and running in like the 90s and the early aughts, a lot of people did experience, and it still happens, of being pressured into partner swapping, or that it was better to be polyamorous or something like this. Oh God, you're monogamous, what's wrong with you? And none of that has anything to do with like, you don't have to be polyamorous or have group sex in order to be neo-tantric. You do not. You do not. So if you encounter a teacher who is pressuring you, run. You do not, choose your teacher wisely. Choose someone who isn't wedded to a really strict dogma that's incongruent with your values. And the reason these things are associated with Neo-tantra is, you probably guessed it, right? Once you go through this process of unshaming your sexual self. I mean, it's been really confusing in the West because we are so heavily shamed and repressed and suppressed. So when the cork popped off of that bottle, when we let that genie out, it was like, oh, it turned into this huge free-for-all. And it got really messy. And on the other hand, once you decondition yourself from the Puritan religious dogma, what happens is that you may naturally find you have a stronger desire, or that you actually do want to have sex with more people. And once you realize that it was just an artificial shaming, and that wasn't actually necessarily natural to human societies in all times and places in history, you're like, oh wait, what do I want to get out of this? And if you take sacred sexuality as a path of awakening, sometimes it is very helpful to allow yourself to experience different people's energies. And I have definitely found this to be true, because who you are as a lover with each different types of people, different types of energies, changes, and it unlocks different things in you, and you learn different things. And so if you're just approaching sexuality as a scientist with a sense of curiosity and play, it might naturally arise that you're like, oh, I want to see what it's like to play with these other people. And so I think that's why those things became associated. The other thing with the group sex is that it can be really special and beautiful and sacred to, again, it's a deep way to unshame yourself. If you saw my interview with William Winters in the men's summit that I did last month, we were talking a lot about play parties as the ultimate unshaming tool. And so it's the same thing here. I think what's really beautiful, though, about neo-tantric group sex, I mean, every teacher does it differently, but one of the things that I think is really beautiful is if you can do it when there's no partner swapping and everyone is there together and you're all following the ritual together, and it's like, you know, a group of 10 couples and they all have the shared intention, right, to create more love, to open their heart chakra more. And if you're all following the same ritual steps at the same time and making love in this particular way, it can be a really otherworldly experience that's so powerful. It can be really bonding and fun and delightful and just out of this world. So, you know, Neo-tantra opens the door and gives you permission to step outside of these conditioned ways of relating to your body and sexuality. And sometimes those might involve experiences that have typically been sort of scorned or made out to be really extreme by the media. But again, they're not. It depends on what your values are. Like, you don't push yourself. So many women have experienced themselves as just being pushed by their man or by the community that felt like they had to step into these things when they really weren't ready or they didn't feel okay about it. And so it needs to be something that really feels true to you, that you're like, no, actually, I want to do this as part of my practice. I want to do this as part of my evolution and my growth. And for some people, their growth is about deepening into continuing to be with the same partner, you know, and you don't want to do rituals with anyone else around, and that's fine. So don't let yourself be forced into these things, is what I'm saying. Okay, so, there's a couple other things I need to speak to. One is, I meant to mention at the beginning that some people are very, very energetically sensitive when it comes to life and sex, and I am not one of those people. But when I have taught people who are extremely energetically sensitive, it's like wild what Neo-tantra opens in them. So for example, maybe you're super energetically sensitive and you just sit across from a person, you don't even know them, and you're not even touching, and you start breathing energy back and forth at the heart or at the third eye or between your genitals, and you can either in your own self go into multiple orgasms or have the other person go into multiple energy orgasms. And of course, when someone who's really sensitive like that is really proficient in the awareness practices, the intention practices, the breathing, and all of these practices of Neo-tantra, then they have very profound experiences quite easily. So there's lots of things, lots of magical, special things that can happen that are kind of indescribable, and you just don't know until you give it a shot. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about today is, why is semen retention associated with Neo-tantra? And this is a complicated question, but I will say that there are certain schools that teach this as the end-all be-all hallmark of neo-tantric practice, and there's others that don't. And neo-tantra is the wild, wild west. There's no official thing that it is. It just depends on who your teacher was, you know, whether it's Osho lineage, whether it's like a Agama lineage or something else, or I don't know what. So what I will say is that while semen retention is not required in order to practice Neo-tantra, and classically what tantric practitioners were doing before tantra was exported to the West varied. So there are actual practices in Buddhist tantra around semen retention, but there's practices in Indian tantra around ejaculating and then using that as an offering to the goddess, and everything in between. Okay, so it just really depends on what tantrics, what era, you know, what branch. And if you have a teacher that tells you, no, this is the only way and this is the true way, and just like, forget about that. Tantra is a very complex and diverse tradition throughout Southeast Asia. What I will say is that I do believe that it's going to be beneficial for every man to undertake this practice at some time in his life, because it is like the ultimate practice in awareness, unshaming, and learning really, really, it's like holding yourself to the fire. It's like walking on coals. It's such a strong practice of, wow, okay, this is what my body's energy is doing, and this is the breath I need to use, and the visualization, and the muscles, and the discipline, and like, it shows you what you're made of as a man, and it gets you in touch with your body, and it forces you to have a new relationship to your sexuality and your genitals like nothing else. It's super powerful to do this practice. Again, not because you should never ejaculate. No, I do not recommend that. But undertaking it brings immense self-awareness and power. And again, it can help you develop non-ejaculatory orgasms, ejaculation choice, please your woman, hold yourself through her highest ecstasy, be able to make love for longer, all of those things, which most men is what they're craving today. So that is the answer to that. Okay, and that's all for today. Next week I'm gonna lead you through a proposed ritual from start to finish, and we'll talk about what sex magic has to do with Neo-tantra. Sex magic coming from the occult tradition, Aleister Crowley, all that stuff. It's such a wild world, you guys. And I'll talk about some books I've been reading on all of these topics that you can read if you're an ultra nerd about this like I am. It's such a fun thing to read about the history of human sexual practices, let me tell you. Okay, well, thanks for being here. I love getting to do these. Remember to share your aha moments and your questions so I can tailor this to you, and I love you all.